When you're a salesperson, you're expected to sell, period. But I got so invested in the medium and I started to love the medium so much and the people who were creating in it, nobody was going to pay me to do what I wanted to do. I at least wanted to decide who I got to work with because of what they had to say. I'd like to hear from more women, for example. And so nobody was going to pay me to have a say in content when I was a salesperson. If you decide to be bold and begin, you have the opportunity to feel humbled and empowered. I totally believe that.
My guest today has been on this podcasting industry journey with me practically since the beginning of my career as an entrepreneur. But she shares with us just how invested she was in what podcasters have to say and helping them keep it all going through ad sales and creating monetization opportunities for them long before she ever started her company, Lipstick and Vinyl, a female-forward podcast ad agency whose motto reads, "We live to give voice to the underrepresented. We see a future of media that is a true reflection of people who live in our society. Through podcasting, we amplify new voices, people like people who sound like them." I had the privilege of working to help create Lipstick and Vinyl's only original production, The Only One in the Room, of which I'm proudly still the executive producer. And if you've been listening for the past couple of weeks, then you've heard from both hosts, Laura Cathcart-Robbins and Scott Slaughter. Allyson has recently made her official public announcement that she has sold Lipstick and Vinyl to the New York radio company Focus 360, and she has accepted an amazing new job at iHeart. The authentic telling of her journey is riddled with lessons and takeaways if you're interested in starting anything, are ready to be bold and take the leap, or if you just want to know what it's like to be a woman in the sales industry, how to venture out on your own, and what it's like to be a part of a new media. I've learned so much by having Allyson by my side, and I think you will too after listening to our conversation. I do want to note that we had some trouble with our recording platform, and unfortunately, Allyson's audio isn't as clear as it normally is, so I do apologize for that. But we didn't want you to miss out on all of the awesome drops of knowledge you're about to hear. So here's my talk with Allyson. Hi, and welcome back to Be Bold Begin. I'm Barcy, your host, and we are here with another amazing guest from the podcast space. She and I met sort of at the beginning of our respective businesses back in 2018, and we connected because she reached out to the manager of one of my clients looking to rep them for ad sales within the company she was building, and Larry Shapiro, shout out to Larry, who was this manager of my client, gave me a call and said that you two ladies need to meet. So we set up a coffee date, and it was just fast friendship from then on with matching podcasts and all. We both have matching black and white kitties. She has the girl, I have the boy, and they're the same age even. So fast forward to now, and the company she built has been through quite a journey, including some big news that I will let her announce to you. But without further ado, the founder of Lipstick and Vinyl, my good friend, Allyson Marino. Welcome, Allyson.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. Very honored to be here. Yay. Yes. It was love at first sight. You left that part out.
You're right. I did. But that's what I was trying to allude to when I said it was a fast friendship.
Yeah, I saw
First
I saw your shoes and I just thought, well, this is a gal I can get down with.
It's all about the shoes. I have to say we did gain or garner a little extra attention from places we go together where I feel like, oh, I remember you girls walking in your pink and your big outfits.
That's right.
So Allyson, our lives probably crossed a few times in life, or should have, I should say, because we're also both from Riverside, California.
Shout out to the 909.
That's right, which is now the 951 in some parts, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So can you just share with us a little bit about your background and how you ended up working first in radio sales?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I grew up, like you said, I spent my formative years in Riverside, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, I suppose you could say, about 75 miles east into the desert from here. My high school was not very prestigious at all, to say the least, but I loved it. And I went to college here locally. I went to Cal State Fullerton. I really didn't know like how it worked, that you could like get loans and go somewhere far on an airplane, because I really hadn't had any experience on airplanes up to that point. So yeah, so I always loved Los Angeles. After college, I lived and worked in Orange County for a time, and then I started working in media in LA. So the first job I had in media was I spent a year working in production at the Late Late Show. So it was when Craig Kilborn changed to Craig Ferguson. It was an amazing experience, but I got really tired of making like $400 or $450 a week, and I couldn't survive anymore.
So real quick, how did you end up there? That sounds like a really cool job that I bet people are like those of us that want to get into media. It's like, how do you start? How do you get there? How did you start? How did you land that?
Social media, even way back then. This was in 2005, and on Friendster, somehow I met this guy and we started talking, and he was a writer for the Late Late Show, but he was my age, super funny guy. And when I told him that I was looking for a job in LA, I mean, I'd already had a professional job at this time, working in marketing for PacSun, the clothing retailer, which was really fun. So I'd already had a professional job, but I needed to start at the very bottom if I wanted to work there. He said, well, you could probably be a talent assistant or something. And it really, truly is not about who you know in entertainment. It's about who knows you. So because this guy, Joe, knew me, he got me an interview with the woman who was the assistant to the host, and she really liked me. I mean, I came in with like a suit and high heels and my little portfolio of like random graphic design that I'd done, and and then I accepted a job. I think I was able to negotiate from $400 to $450 because I had been a professional before. So I took a big piece of humble pie, and yeah, so the answer is social media. The good old, now defunct Friendster.
I love that. And I love that the reframe of like, it's not who you know, it's who knows you, because
it's true.
Because it is about showing up and finding a way to be remembered and making the connection, because there's lots of people in my phone book that I could probably text and they probably would remember who I am. But then there's those that would, because we spent time making that connection happen. And that's a different, that's where the magic can happen, or where the opportunities can keep coming. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you spend time authentically making a connection, and whether they can do something for you or not, I mean, there's a whole other, I guess, road to go down of who's worth your time and who's not. As gauche or rude as that sounds, and it's something we really have to learn, that I've taken a career to learn.
Well, that's, our energy and time are precious, and having boundaries around where we put that and what we extend is important. And I think it's difficult for all of us to navigate at times.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're right. It sounds harsh, but it's not. It's just protection.
It's just the truth.
It's the truth. It's just the truth.
Yes.
And it's like,
laid out there.
Yeah, exactly. So go on, jump back into your story. So we've got the job at the Late Late?
The Late Late Show, yeah.
The Late Late Show, and it was time to move on.
It was time to move on. And so a guy, it's all about who knows you. So the next job I got was a guy who, when I worked at PacSun, he would call to try to sell radio advertising to me. And PacSun, like, we advertised on the ESPN or EXPN X Games, and we advertised with Teen People and Teen Vogue. And we didn't do any radio, but he called and he had this Mixmaster mic, like the DJ from the Beastie Boys. He was trying to sell me a Mixmaster mic sponsorship. And because I am a big Beastie Boys fan, I would take his calls. Huh. So I was at the X Games in Philadelphia, and he came from New York to meet me, again, trying to sell me something or other. Another guy that I was kind of romantically interested in, and vice versa, but whatever. Yeah, so this one also came through a guy, but he thought, he kept telling me, you'd be a great salesperson. So I was really scared, but the woman that ran the office for Westwood One in LA, a big radio network that still exists and does a lot with podcasts as well, she really talked me into coming there. She said, you'll make the most money you've ever made in your life. With media sales, you can really do well. And, I think you'd be great to have on the team. So I took her advice, and then she taught me how to sell. And it's hard to be a salesperson who doesn't sell anything at first. It's really hard. It's kind of depressing. But I read all those goofy sales books and, just kept making, at that time it was making phone calls. It was horrible because you're like in this big open space with everybody can hear you. Like the whole thing back then too in this office was you don't get an office. Offices are for closers. So once you started closing big deals, you get an office. But until then, you have to sit like in this bullpen and be like, "Hi, this is Allyson calling from Westwood One, blah, 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 blah." And
wow.
It was just stomach turning. But eventually I closed some deals and got my office.
Ah, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. So I have to ask, because the sales happens in so many types of businesses. If you could give like the 1, 2, 3 in like a couple of short sentences, can you do that? What would they be?
How to be a good salesperson?
Yeah. Like how do you close?
Yeah. You connect with the person, find some common ground because it's humans doing business with humans. You listen to them and you try to find out what's important to them. So after connecting, I would say, if we're going to say bullet points, a needs assessment or listening, because what you really want them to tell you, like let the client talk. So many salespeople do what is called in sales, show up, throw up. You don't want to do that. Like if the client is or the prospect is talking to you, let them talk because they're telling you how to sell to them. So whatever their problem they're trying to solve is, that's what you want to find out, because sometimes you don't have the right thing for somebody and that's okay. Move on. But you're trying to find the problem that they're trying to solve. And then, so the third thing is, deliver them something that solves their problem.
Nice.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. But it sounds basic, but we don't think of it. If we're not approaching it from that basic standpoint, then it's so easy to lose our way, I think. And I think this could be applied to networking. This could be applied to conversations, even friendships. I mean, really in so many areas. So I heard you say, make the connection, listen and hear what they want, right? Like, what do they need? And then see if you have a solution for them. Are those the 3 points?
That's exactly right.
That's awesome. Thank you. I love that.
You're welcome. Yeah, you too can sell a ton of radio. I mean, I think it's a good thing too. I keep seeing women on Twitter and other places say normalize talking about salaries. And so I talked about already my job in TV where I made $450 a week. When I started at Westwood One, this was in 2005. I was 25-ish, 25, 26. I was 25 for most of the year. And my salary was $65,000 a year. And that was my base. But then I worked there for 5 years. And so 1 year I made 98, then I made 150, then I made 198. I did make so much money. It was an amazingly fun time. So when I left there, my best year was I made almost 200,000. It was 198. And I was 29 years old. It was amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So sales can be really, really lucrative for sure. It's not easy, but it's also not rocket science. You can sell anything, once you can sell one thing, you can sell anything. So it was really, really cool. And that woman who, who became my boss, she really did keep her promise. She taught me how to sell. And then I made the most, that I had made in my life. So that was really, really cool.
Was that rewarding? Was it rewarding to be in a job where you saw that conversion happen on a regular basis?
So cool. Yeah, because you could when I finally learned how commissions worked, when they started rolling in, and I didn't know the math. It's very complicated. You make 3%, 5%, whatever on the net amount of blah blah blah. I didn't get it. I was just kind of waiting to see what happened. I got it after a while, but my first commission check that came in, I bought myself an iMac, and I was so thrilled because it was oh my gosh, I have an extra $1,200. This is incredible. I had no money before, and I grew up with no money. I was just used to having no money. So it was really, really exciting. And, then to be able to go, get on an airplane when I wanted to was another huge rewarding thing that I had never been able to do before. Just to have the money to not, if you got a cavity and you need to have your cavity filled, or if you got a flat tire or whatever, it was really exciting. Yes.
To take care of yourself. Yeah. And in addition to, there's a comfort in not having to worry about surviving anymore.
huge, huge, huge security that then the downside of that was I really became like terrified of losing it. So you figure it out.
I relate to that. That's actually really interesting that you bring that up, because I think a lot of us suffer from one or the other, like especially those of us who end up sort of finding something along the way that works, that we're fighting for. Let's say we get that, we have that reward, and then that scarcity mentality doesn't just disappear. It may even increase. And I've experienced that at times, and it's up and down. And sometimes I really can let go of that. And then other times I feel like I don't have any money, even though I have the most I've had at any given point, let's say, than in the past when I felt fine about it. So it's interesting and strange that this happens. That's my experience. Can you share a little bit about what that was like for you?
Absolutely. And it reminds me of something, again, like I was taught to sell by like some old school radio salespeople, and they're gnarly. They're just like, it's very cutthroat. It's very, because you're like, it's just very competitive.
Right.
Anyway, so one of the sales managers used to say, you want to hire a salesperson with really expensive habits. You want somebody who golfs, who scuba dives, because then they have to like keep up their lifestyle. But I think it's very, very easy to just you swell to meet whatever it is you're making. So right. You probably have more expensive habits now, or you buy more expensive groceries, or you're more free with your entertainment. You just rise to meet the level no matter how high it gets.
Interesting. So you think it's just this feeling of like, okay, I have this much more. So the margin stays the same, it sounds, between like what you have that makes you feel secure.
I certainly I bought my first Lexus. Like I was driving a Mitsubishi when I started at Westwood One, mm-hmm. But then I remember I was getting a big windfall. I was getting like an $18,000 commission. And so I called this financial advisor that I had hired, and I said, I'm getting this big windfall. Can I buy a Lexus? He's like, sure, buy a Lexus. So, saving for my future, but which is important, definitely, when you start making enough money, or even before you start making enough money. But saving for the future is important. But yeah, so I bought a Lexus. So like if I happen jobless today, it's so much more expensive, my life is, than if I was jobless when I was 26, because sure. I had, a smaller place to live, less expensive car, I didn't put Botox in my face, which is, expensive. Just so many things that you just kind of, your lifestyle expands to fill.
Right. Let's bring it back to what happened next. So you were working at Westwood One?
Yeah, I was in 2010, the wheels kind of started to fall off network radio, and I went to work for my biggest client, who at the time was Intuit. So they make TurboTax and QuickBooks. So that was cool. So when I started there, I made, let's just keep going with this money thing. So when I started there, I made $125,000 as my base. But then I think I had either a $25,000 or $50,000 like bonus on top of that I could get. So it was really exciting then too, because I had a $65,000 base before. So if I it was just nice to not have the pressure of having to make commission. But it was an incredible experience, because I was the person who at this company who spent at the time $200 million on media. I was the person that got to evaluate and hire their ad agencies, people who are buying the media, and do the big kind of media negotiations with Google and at the time AOL. Gosh, media changes so much. It's
wow.
so different than when we're talking about it. Yeah. So I learned a ton. I used to be on the outside selling, and so to be able to look under the hood of what makes all these different things tick and what's important to, an agency, versus a brand versus the media seller was really, really cool. So I did that for 3 years.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was until 2013.
Okay. Was there a big difference between brand selling versus looking under the hood, like you just said?
Yeah. I mean, when you're a salesperson, you don't know they don't tell you what their budget is. They don't tell you you don't know how the agency's being incentivized, you don't know if they're making a percentage off of the amount of media you sell them, or if they're just being paid a flat fee. So to know what makes the other side tick, to know how much budget, you're working with, as the client, as the brand, to know how you pay your agencies. And it gave me a really, really soft, gushy spot for agencies, because they have such a hard time, just being paid for their work and like being valued for their work, creative work, like the people who come up with commercials and write ads and set up photo shoots. It's just very commoditized, and they have, thinner and thinner margins. And so it gave me a really good appreciation for ad agencies and how hard they work for the money that they make, and how hard that brands are on their agencies.
Wow. So you got a real whole picture there from going to one to the other. That's really fascinating. And that must have been really revealing to see it from that side.
Yeah, it was. It was also really educational too, because I was dealing with like digital buys. So I was selling radio, where I was selling like rating points and, cost per thousands, which is a truism across every media, but like cost per points, and just negotiating only in a traditional radio world. So to learn how to buy digital display or a Yahoo homepage takeover, again, it sounds old and clunky now, but those were the things that, were big deals, was really, really cool too, because I thought, well, if I'm going to put this radio life behind me, I'm going to need to learn some digital stuff. So it was cool for that reason too.
Oh, wow. Okay. So were you planning to move away from radio sales or radio as a company, and you wanted to learn something digital? So I'm really curious now.
Yes.
What did you have on the forefront that you were hoping to sort of lean into?
I never had a master plan. I really, really didn't. I just knew that I was going to need to learn some media that was not old-fashioned radio. That's still so intuitive though. And I think ahead of the edge there, having the edge, I should say, and ahead of the curve, and knowing that like something was going to change, that something was on the forefront maybe. I think that's still very telling. So funny, because I would love to take credit for that, but that's not what happened. I just kind of, it just felt right at the time. I'm not the kind of entrepreneur that sees around corners. I can see it once it's like rolled up into my view. But it was cool, because
I'm still going to give you credit for that intuitive thing, because that's something that comes from our gut. And you can't take that away from you. I can't take away that gut feeling from you, whether you knew what it was going to be or not. Most people don't. I'm still giving you that credit.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I feel 2 inches taller. It's funny that it's kind of a nice transition, because the next step was I didn't think that working for a software as a service company really was my personal brand, which was insane, because that company, I made great money. I had tremendous benefits. They had so many resources. Like, it's software as a service. They just have all the money. So, but I didn't think it was my personal brand. So I jumped without a net. I left before I had a new job, which I don't recommend ever. And I went on this amazing vacation with my boyfriend at the time. And then when I came back and like reality, kind of set in, and I had to find a job, it took me a while. But the people who were interested in my resume were these fledgling little tiny podcast companies, because my resume was network radio. It was radio that you sell nationally. So it wasn't selling for one radio station. It was selling like NFL football across the whole country, or selling NCAA basketball or Grammy programming, but it was selling it across a whole network of national stations. So podcasts being national, and me understanding how an agency works and how a brand works, these podcast companies, it was Midroll at the time, and Podcast One, and they both offered me the same amount of money, which was $90,000. And, I just left like what I'd left, whatever. But yeah, it turned into these were the people that were interested in my resume. I could sell nationally. And so that's what I did. I chose Midroll because at the time, Podcast One just had a bunch of pro wrestlers on their lineup, and I didn't feel any connection to that. And so I went with Midroll. The guy at Midroll, Lex Friedman, shout out to Lex, who's still a friend.
Yes, shout out to Lex.
He was the only other salesperson that was there when I got hired, and he, of course, was in New York. I'm in LA, but I sat outside the office of Adam Sachs, who was the CEO, and we were just a very small team at the point we were bootstrapped. And when I look back after starting a company of my own, I mean, if you were working for a bootstrap startup, that means they've taken no money from anybody else, right? They're like doing it all, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They paid me a salary. They paid me commission. They paid my health insurance. Like, I look back on that and I'm just like, wow, I just appreciate it so much, because that's hard to do. And there were like,
It
you know,
is.
I think when I got hired, there were 25 or 30 of us. Now
Wow.
there are hundreds. Yeah.
Yeah, they're big now. And you're right. I didn't know they were bootstrapped. I didn't know a lot of that story, actually, the details of that story, I should say, because I've known you for a little bit now, Allyson, but it's fun to hear sort of the all the details to the journey. I know parts of it, right? I know the big chapter turns, but this is fascinating for anyone who's interested in business, I think, because you see how you can create a path that feels right, that you can just kind of keep exploring and get somewhere and grow and have experiences, and that there's companies that show up like this bootstrapped little company called Midroll. And if you're in the podcast space, you might know that name. They're huge now. They're one of the biggest players, right?
They were first got bought by Scripps, an old-fashioned media company that owns like the Food Network and TV and radio stations. And then after that, just a few weeks ago, the deal was completely closed, where they were then acquired by SiriusXM. So yeah, for a couple $100 million.
It's amazing. That's a really cool journey for that company as well.
Yeah, it was cool to have that experience.
And that you were there in the beginning, like the very, very beginning.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And I love that experience, where it was like, you know, at that time, I mean, just think of now, they have studios in New York and LA, and they have, you know, they put on huge festivals, and they have 250 shows. Wow. And blah, blah, blah. You know, they do like, they are responsible for selling My Favorite Murder and Office Ladies and Mark Maron and just a ton. And, you know, like back when I was there, we needed to print something. We're like, oh my gosh, somebody's got to go to Staples and buy a printer. So I don't think I ever would have started my own company had I not been there to see what they did and how they did it.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's jump to that, your story for wanting to start your company. So I'd like to know a little bit more, just like all the journey I just heard. Like I said, I know the chapter turns, but I want to hear what the pivotal moment was for you to make that push, the leap into entrepreneurship. It seems like the leap from the company that you're like, this doesn't feel aligned for me anymore. So you took a leap like that once before, that was a pay cut and working for a new media and things like that. So what was the thing that caused you to kind of jump again and take a leap into something brand new?
Good question. I spent a good amount of time. I think part of it was, I don't want to say naivety, but it was a little bit of immaturity, I have to say, and a little bit of, I think, misplaced resentment, because I spent time at these, you know, various stages of podcast startups, from bootstrap to just working on just to receive Series B to, you know, to having a major investor. And so I saw different paths along the way. And I feel like I was really in at the beginning of, it turned out, you know, from 2014 when I started in podcasts at Midroll to zoom ahead to now the beginning of 2018, like I knew all the people doing all the stuff from the start. Like when we didn't have ratings, like I called Nielsen and I'm like, hey, Dave, like we need to figure this out. You know, and I'm not saying I figured it out, but like it was so small then that we all knew each other. And I felt like, hey, I have something of value for this medium that, like, you know, I mean, that other people just don't have because it's so new. And I just felt like when you're a salesperson, you are encouraged because, you know, you have a responsibility and a number against your head. You're expected to sell, period. But I got so invested in the medium, and I started to love the medium so much, and the people who were creating in it, and have a real, you know, really want to support them. Nobody was going to pay me at that point in my career. I guess I was like 39, I think, 38, 39. 38 or 39. Nobody was going to pay me to do what I wanted to do, which was have a say in, like, I didn't want to necessarily produce, but I at least wanted to decide who I got to work with because of what they had to say. So all these, you know, programs that were being greenlit when I worked for others were stuff that I thought, oh, well, that's going to be really hard to sell, or that's just like all the other stuff. And there just seemed to be a hole, like, where my interests happened to lie. Like, I'd like to hear from more women, for example. And so nobody was going to pay me to have a say in content when I was a salesperson on paper and in my resume. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try it out on my own. I saw these other people do it. Why can't I? And so one of my mentors, who is the founder of Podcast One, Norm Pattis, he knows me well. I know him from my days at Westwood. When I told him I was going to do this in the spring of 2018, he said, Allyson, do you want to know what I think? And I said, Norm, of course. And he said, get a fucking job. And so nonetheless, yeah, I mean, he said, you're not starting off with any capital. You don't have the money to compete these days. Wondery had just gotten $5 million at that time. And, like people were starting to play bigger with bigger checks. And, it was before even Spotify. And, he said, there's no way. So each time I've had a victory along the way, Norm's one of the first to know about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that there was someone there to kind of bounce something off of. But so let's recap real quick. So you weren't seeing content that you wanted, that you weren't particularly excited about coming through the doors of the job that you were at. And this is in the podcast space when you were working at Podcast One?
I did an assignment there for 6 months because, without going in all the details, Norm was going to help fund a company of my own in the summer of 2017. It didn't end up working out. So he's like, a good friend, and he didn't want to leave me hanging. So he said, come work for 6 months, which ended up being a really great experience because of what I got to do there. And so when that 6 months ended, I was like, seriously, you're just going to let me go? And yes, Allyson, we said 6 months. Goodbye. Thank you. And so when that happened, I just thought, well, I got to create something for myself because I know how to do this. I know what needs to be done. I've been part of teams that did it. And I'm going to take all the best things that I learned from those other folks and add, my own dashes where I think appropriate. Like I'm going to create an ad product that is exactly what I've been asked for by all of these agencies over the years. I'm going to give them exactly what they want. Super, super easy. And that's what I did.
What was it that they were asking for that you wanted to
It's just super, super straightforward. They just wanted a host to read the spot. They wanted the host to try the product. They wanted it to be 60 seconds. They wanted a cost per thousand that worked. And they, if an ad under-delivered, they wanted to be made up. No problem. We'll make it up. They just wanted to be treated like human beings. And so to be able to have the authority to say yes when the right thing to do was say yes was one of the things I was most excited about.
Wow. So from like this internal agency to agency or brand, but you wanted to serve the client, the brand client.
Yeah. And because the agency people too, they know exactly what they're doing, and why make their job harder? It just seems so easy to give them what they're asking for. I think in other organizations I'd worked for that were bigger, sometimes there was just a disconnect, not through a fault of anybody, but it was just like the people that were controlling the inventory and controlling the impressions weren't talking to the people who talked to the talent, who were like, hey, this brand really wants to work with you because they like this about you. Like just adding that human element along the way is really important and really can make the whole experience better for everybody. So being a very small operation, I was all that person, all those people. So I just kind of got to do that.
Yeah, and it makes sense coming from the background you have with sales, where that is how you were working with your in your sales position, was like, how can we make this work? It's like wanting to serve the person on the other side of the phone line, the email, whatever it is. It's like, well, what do you need, and how can I give it to you? I'm hearing that through this sort of building.
You got me, Barcy.
What you were building at the time. It makes so much sense.
You got me. You found a through line that I hadn't found myself. Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Well, that's really cool. And it makes a lot of sense that someone like you, who worked every angle, like you said, under the hood with these sort of bigger, once you got into that larger level, and then starting from a place of like ground up, and then seeing, like you said, different levels of companies, from bootstrapping to Series B to, things getting bought out eventually. But I see where the pathway of starting a company feels very doable and feasible. And it's like, I know how to do this job. And I know what the company from the inside out looks like from this stage to this stage. And not to say that any of that is easy, but when something starts to make that much sense, I can understand the want to kind of dive in and see what happens. So I commend you for following that sort of thread that you were feeling, because again, not easy, but doing something like that, people don't do it because they know it's not easy. So I'm I'm just so proud of you and of what you've created, which we're going to get into more. But I want to talk about the content that you represent a little bit, because now that we understand how this all came together and how you wanted to serve the brands, there's the content that, and the hosts, the podcast hosts that support it, right? That have that other exchange. So that's the other component. So you mentioned earlier that you wanted to hear more from women, and Lipstick and Vinyl, the ad agency you built, was very female voice focused and just underrepresented voices in general as well. So what was it about that you landed on to brand everything around, to wrap everything around?
So I started Lipstick and Vinyl, yes, wanting to have a say in the content. And so for me, just like you said, I wanted to find podcasts, people who were already making podcasts. That's an important piece of this, because I, without you, don't make things. I have a particular, skill set. So it had to be podcasts that were either going to start already without me for the most part, or were already existing. And that what I have to offer a podcast is I can help monetize your audience. And so it just kind of organically happened that the shows that I started working with were women. Like, when you open yourself up and start saying what you're doing to people, honestly, like the people that you have in your life from your professional life, it's incredible how they rise up to help you. Like, oh, well, you should meet this person I know. Mm. And my friend and your friend, Josh Levine, he's super good at that. Well, he's who introduced us to Laura from The Only One in the Room, and that's how that got made. But yeah, so he's a really good connector, and he introduced me to a woman who runs a magazine called Dame Magazine, and she was just starting to make these podcasts and really, important shows about politics from a woman's perspective and other really important issues like food deserts. So she came and we started working together, and she had one podcast and she had two, and then she brought in this other woman who had 8. So all of a sudden I had a network. So then I could go to agencies. I thought I could go to Veritone and Ad Results and say, hi, it's Allyson. We've worked together for years. Here's something for you to buy that I'm representing, And I thought they would buy it, but they didn't, because I kind of feel like maybe they don't know if this is just an out of work salesperson saying they're doing their own thing, and maybe this will pass. So it took a little while. It took a few months, but it didn't take a long time. It took a few months. But so we're in our third year now, and each year we continue to, get more and more business from these big podcast agencies, because they know Lipstick and Vinyl, they trust us, they know that we're going to, do what we say we're going to do, and we are going to be easy to work with. We have quality content that reaches a female audience, which is a really, really valuable thing in media, especially in audio media. Radio skews male, and so podcasts still slightly skew male, just ever so slightly, but nonetheless, a female audience is really valuable to a brand.
So it just sort of organically happened.
Yeah, just kind of, it was kind of an easy thing to get behind as a woman myself. And, and that's why I kind of feel like I had some misplaced resentment. I feel like because when I look back now, the management team at Midroll, at ACAST, at Podcast One, I wanted to be part of the management team, but I think my approach was really, really poor. And I think I was, maybe too aggressive and maybe too just kind of stomping into a room without reading it in a way. And I was not patient enough to just do my job well and have that be noticed, because I felt I felt like I was in some sort of a hurry. I was in my 30s and I felt like I've already waited my turn. And it's being impatient and stomping into a room before reading it is not the way to get ahead in life and in business. So I think I had some resentment toward the men who were at the top of these media companies, when I probably need to take more responsibility for how my path, turned out or didn't turn out while I was there. Nonetheless, it caused me to, start a company and have a great experience learning all the stuff I thought I knew but didn't.
Do you find that the journey, the entrepreneurial journey, was humbling then?
Oh, yeah. Super humbling, but also super empowering, because one thing that's cool when you start your own company is that all of the meetings that I wanted to be in on when I worked for other people, like the high level strategic meetings with outside companies or outside partners. I so badly wanted to be in those. And when you're the decision maker, when you're the top of the heap at a company, that's who you get to deal with. So I just got to have all these meetings that I always wanted to have. So that's been a really cool thing. I've got to make really good relationships. And also it's like the people who started out, when I started out, we've like been through all this together. So now they're higher up in their companies. And so it's been really, really cool. And I've been able to have some conversations that, you know, I've learned a ton from. But then at the other end of the spectrum, it's like, how am I going to eat next month, and how am I going to pay myself and, you know, just survive. So humbling, but also empowering.
Definitely. Yeah. I said so many things there that I want to break down, but yeah, just, I relate to both of,
cool.
to both of those things. It is humbling and it is so empowering to do something on the terms that you believe upon, like the thing that is, you know, the way you feel you've always wanted things to be done, and also to learn through the experience. So there's the personal experience around that. And then there's this media that's very special because it's new and everyone is growing up together. And I really respect and admire that you were able to, I started early, but you started very early from the inside out. And I'm a content creator, so I feel a little outside in when it comes to the business of it, originally at least. And having that experience from the ground up when it was really just starting, I love going to a conference with Allyson Marino because everyone knows who you are, and it's so heartwarming, honestly. And I just, Aww. It makes me smile and it makes me proud. And I love the fact that I get to walk around with you and call you my friend and know that you have clout in those rooms. And it's really special. And there aren't many areas in the world left where this gets to happen, and where you get to grow an industry together and grow up together. It's really special. So I just wanted to share that with you. Oh,
wow. That was the nicest compliment ever. Can you please soundbite that so I can share it everywhere so I can amplify that? That's really nice of you.
100%. I will be happy to.
It's like the thing I'm really most proud of, as goofy as it may sound to other people, but that means so much to me, what you said. Thank you.
I do mean that. And it's just so true. And just to add to that, the knowing someone part, or, you know, having someone know you in spaces where we might be new or we're trying to grow, you've definitely helped my path, my journey so far, and had some really, really wonderful experiences because of the connections you've made for myself and my company and my brand. So Yay. It's been just that much brighter to have you, you know, by my side with your matching cat.
Likewise. Well, it's great to have you by my side, and it's funny to hear you say that you feel like you're from the outside looking in, because the creator is always like the juicy stuff. Like that's always the gem, the jewel in the middle of everything. And so from a business perspective, I always feel like, you know, I have to prove myself to creators. Like, I'm not a sharky salesperson, even though like on your behalf, I will be a shark. But, you know, I'm not a shark, and you can like me, and you can, you know, be your creator self around me. So it's just funny for us all to feel like we're on the outside, which is silly, but it is what it is.
I know. It is. And I think it's just wherever I feel I don't have all the knowledge, I feel outside of that, whatever that is.
Right.
And I think that works for everyone probably. And being in a business now and having a business where there's just a lot more insider, in my opinion, right, from my content perspective, I feel like I have this insider look on how everything works together. Where as a creator, all you want to do is just create and make new things, and that's it. Like, you know, but if you want people to know who you are and you just not know who other people are, then you've got to get yourself into that space of understanding the other side, right? Whatever those other sides are. And there's usually more than one. So that has been really fun to be on the inside of that. And now I'm sort of infatuated with entrepreneurship as well, because that's a very creatory space too, in its own right. Yeah, there's there's endless opportunities to feel somehow humbled and empowered all at the same time. And I think that is like the essence of life, isn't it?
If you decide to be bold and begin, you have the opportunity to feel humbled and empowered. I totally believe that.
Exactly. And I wouldn't trade either. I think both are so wonderful to experience. And I think we need both as human beings to grow. And if you're someone who wants to grow, and if you're listening to this, you probably are, then it's okay, right, to have both experiences, and they can live together at the exact same time, which is strange at first, but
yeah, there's a lot of times I'm crumpled up in the fetal position on my couch with a blanket over me, just going, what have I done with my life? But, they're less than the good times.
Yeah, I've had those experiences where I feel that, and then all these amazing things happen that very same day. It's strange how that so much can happen in such a short period of time, and then the next day happens and it's a new version of that. It's so fascinating.
It can happen really quickly. That's such a good point, and it does. And one thing that I've noticed recently is that when you're working in isolation, like we all have for the past year, most of us have, you don't realize like how much you're actually accomplishing. You're probably working your butt off and you don't give yourself credit for it. When my parents were here over the holidays, my mom's like, I can't even believe what you accomplish in a day. And I felt so good for somebody to see that, like, if I feel like I've done nothing, she's like recounts to me all the things she heard me do. And I just, it's nice to have any feedback, even if somebody doesn't know what you're doing, to hear like, wow, you did a lot. It's just, you forget that and it's hard to tell yourself that.
It is. And it's great to have a witness. It's what I call someone witnessing my life. It's in isolation, you don't feel like there's a witness. And I think that's what you and I found in each other originally, is like, someone who will understand this journey I'm embarking on right now.
Wow.
Because I didn't know anyone else doing that.
Wow.
And you were the only other female company in the space at the time starting something like I was starting, and on different sides of the spectrum.
But totally complementary.
Could work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that worked out really nicely, I think. But just this idea of having someone there who I can say some jargon to, or talk about my day and vice versa. And it's not lost on either person, and there's someone there to witness it.
Yeah, we know the same people, so we can be like, oh yeah, what about this guy? What about this guy? Fun.
There's that too.
Yeah.
So on that note, I actually wanted to ask you about your self-care, because for me, it's been a struggle through this experience to maintain self-care, because there is so much that always has to be done, and it usually is I'm bootstrapping so far, and it's a one-person show a lot of the time. And as you grow, it's not as much, but it's still struggling to maintain that self-care. I just wanted to ask, what's that been like for you?
Great question. I've had to learn a lot, I have to say. Like, when I first started the company, I celebrated small victories a lot. And so I spent a lot of time, drinking and partying and just thinking like, oh, I deserve this. I'm doing something so difficult, so I deserve this. And, thinking that I was exhausted from doing, my job, but I was just doing too much extracurricular stuff. And that's why I was exhausted. So over the course of the pandemic, I've had the opportunity to like slow down. And I've learned that when I'm not drinking and when I have a clear head, I can be much more effective, and I can get so much more done when I'm trying to do things and be productive, like be present when I'm sitting down to work. And it turns out that actually, even as an entrepreneur, I have a lot more time on my hands. So I think that self-care, It's a journey that I've had to learn, but I only felt overextended when I was overextending myself in, non-productive places. Now I even take a nap during the day sometimes, and I'm an entrepreneur. I would never consider that before. I would think, no, I have to be like grinding all the time. But that grinding just resulted in like no productivity, and really, just kind of, I suffered in all areas of my life. So now, like, I'll take an hour and do Pilates during the day, which is, I don't feel bad about it, because it helps me to be good.
Right. To show up as your whole self.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think during the pandemic, I think that it could go either way. Like you could drink a lot and, it's been kind of easy to kind of, I guess, clean up my act, as you could say, during the pandemic, because you're not, encouraged, or there's not all these events where it's like, come have happy hour, and then I was the person at happy hour who would turn it into like a disco night, and like, that's not a thing, like when you're 40, but it was for me for a time. So yeah, so to like cut the disco out, I mean, there's always disco in my heart, but but to just not be even tempted, and to not even be tempted by like any social gatherings or restaurants or whatever, has been a nice break.
Wow, there are light and bright sides to the pandemic, and I think that's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for each of us, the sides that we maybe got to improve, or where we got to rest in a different way, or whatever the thing was, got to do something we normally wouldn't do, or so I appreciate that sort of explanation and how that served you, and for sharing that in general.
Cool. Yeah. Go to bed on time, drink lots of water, all that stuff.
Yeah. So I want to ask, what if someone who wants to start a business, someone who's thinking about entrepreneurship, or just starting a venture of their own, whatever size or whatever that might be, do you have a little piece of advice you can give them?
Sure. So be bold and swashbuckle your way through it, and do things that people tell you that you can't. Absolutely. But do it in a measured, responsible way where you can bring people along with you. They're not just thinking you're absolutely insane, and, you'd be a little insane. So absolutely do that. And, because if people are uncomfortable with an idea, it's probably new, and people don't take to change, like people are uncomfortable with change. And yeah, if somebody says to you about your idea, well, nobody else is doing that, well, that's why I'm doing it oftentimes, right? So that's one thing. And then the other practical piece is just learn how to do the math of like banking, and like learn what accounts payable and receivable are, because it took me a while to learn that language. And everybody likes to be paid on time, and everybody likes to, know where they stand. So just be responsible about the business part of it, because it is actually a business. So treat it like a business is my other piece.
Fantastic. That's really great advice. So be willing to take the risk and be willing to treat it like a business.
Yes.
Even if it's creative, because there's a lot of creative people that listen, and
yes,
it's okay to have both at the same time.
It's not
okay
selling out.
Have a creative business.
Yeah, it's not selling out. It's like
exactly
the difference between my business surviving and not surviving is because I learned how to run like a balance sheet, and my business wouldn't have survived had I not done that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason systems and organization why that stuff works. It just does.
Not
it's
selling
very freeing
out. Yeah.
Once we learn that stuff, it's not selling out.
No.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And speaking of your company,
speaking of selling out,
there's some news that you can share.
Yeah.
Speaking of selling out, no. Speaking
Completely.
of keyword selling,
all of the above. Yeah. So I got a job. I run Lipstick and Vinyl for 3 years. Right now I'm going through the due diligence process with another company who's buying Lipstick and Vinyl. And if things stay the way that they are laid out now, they'll keep the brand, and they will add their existing female shows to Lipstick and Vinyl, and they'll grow it and continue to, make money for the creators on the network. And that would just be tremendous. But I've never done this before, right? So I don't know what falls apart during this stage. But, and I've been balancing that with, I was offered a new job, and it just kind of came at the right time. I needed to raise a couple $1 million to make Lipstick and Vinyl grow the way that it can and the way it deserves to. And I didn't accomplish that in the past like 9 months is when I kind of gave myself that timeline. And so, you have to make decisions for your life and for what's good for you, and the exhilarating thrill of not knowing how you're going to, cover things at the end of the month. It's cool for a while, but, I'm 42 now, and I'm, I kind of exhausted all my resources building and keeping alive Lipstick and Vinyl. And so I wouldn't change anything, but I, came to a point where it wasn't something I was going to be struggling like for my life to continue to run. It needed help, right? So excitingly enough, it kind of, intersected me making the decision of I need to find someone else to run this company. It just kind of intersected with finding this opportunity at iHeart. So I've really sold out to work for the man. But what's cool about it is I get to be creative. I get to be strategic because when you have the comfort of a salary again, you don't have to worry about feeding yourself and you can actually focus on doing cool work, which is something that is a luxury to me now. Like, I appreciate it so much. And like, I just realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to have $400 more a month because I don't pay for my own health insurance. That's pretty tremendous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And
Thank
just to
you.
give some insight, we're recording this on March 23rd. So you're going, as you're listening, it's going to be a couple of months later. So we'll see what happens.
I hope you have good news.
I'm sure it'll go smoothly. We will. I feel it. It's going to be great.
That's right.
No matter what happens,
Yes.
You're going to survive and you're going to know what to do.
You always will survive. Yes.
Yeah. The intuitive side of you has taken inventory of the things you've learned along the way and navigated yourself into the next thing and the next thing. And that's hard to do, to trust that. And even if it doesn't always work out the way we expect, most things don't. So it's all about, following the thread that feels right and taking the risk and making sure you have some ducks in a row if you can. Like your great advice that you gave, know a little bit about business if you can before you completely jump right in. But
yeah, no, thank you so much for saying
without
that.
the risk.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that because I keep saying I never had a plan, but when you put it in the way you so lovely put it about following your gut along the way, that is what I did actually. So thank you for making that feel like actually something that I can honor and something that's good that I did, even if I didn't know that's what I was doing, but you just made me feel really good about that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And from this perspective, I feel that that's what I've been watching throughout your journey.
Wow, you're a nice friend. That's really nice. I hope it's helpful to people. I hope this is helpful to people.
It is, because I know what it's like to just feel the scary feelings while you're in the process of something. And again, without the witness and someone telling you like, yeah, like I see where this is coming from. I know what that feels like. And to have someone say, yeah, like this is what it's coming from. And you're consistent in that. And that's good to know. It's good information at the least, whether it feels good or not. It's just good information.
So message to the listeners, if you are lucky enough to have Christina Barcy as a friend, you're going to be fine. That's my biggest advice. Find her.
Well, speaking of connecting, how can we connect with you? How can someone who's listening connect with you?
Oh, that's lovely. So I live a lot on Twitter these days, actually. So I'm Allyson, SSALLYSONSS on Twitter. On Instagram, it's my first name and then 2 awkward underscores and then my last name. So maybe show notes is good. Allyson_Marino on Instagram.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Allyson, this has been amazing. And I'm so glad that you joined me.
Me too. Thank you. This was really, really fun. I really hope it's helpful to some listeners, and what a cool process. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Be Bold Begin. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so as not to miss an episode. So the best way to ensure you get all the new episodes is by subscribing. Help us build a positive community by joining the Facebook group, also called Be Bold Begin. I'll be checking it daily to answer and acknowledge any of your questions and comments. Stay positive and safe out there.